In the spring of 1871, doctors in Virginia were whispering about a woman who should not have been alive. Not injured, not sick, alive. She was 43 years old. She had survived smallpox, typhoid fever, and cholera. Three of the deadliest diseases of the 19th century. Diseases that wiped out families, towns, and entire communities. Diseases that killed millions of Americans. Most people did not survive even one. Mary survived all three. Her body carried the scars. Her skin told the story. But she stood on her feet, breathing, thinking, remembering. And that alone terrified the men who examined her. Because Mary did not fit into their understanding of death. Doctors believed disease followed rules. You got sick. You weakened. You died. That was the order of things. But Mary broke that order. She broke it 3 times. And in a world that believed science explained everything, anything that could not be explained became dangerous. Before we continue, if you are fascinated by dark history, medical mysteries, and true stories that were buried for decades, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear. Like the video, share it with someone who loves history, and tell us in the comments which state you are watching from. We love hearing from voices all across America. Now let us return to 1871. To Richmond, Virginia, a city still haunted by fire and war. 6 years earlier, Richmond had burned. When Confederate forces evacuated the city in April of 1865, they set fire to warehouses and armories to keep supplies from Union troops. The flames spread fast, faster than anyone expected. Entire blocks disappeared under smoke and heat. By the time Union soldiers arrived and organized firefighting crews, more than 20 city blocks were gone. In 1871, the scars were still visible everywhere. Empty lots stretched between half-standing buildings. Brick walls leaned at odd angles like broken teeth. Weeds pushed through cracked foundations. The James River flowed past warehouses that would never be filled again. Once proud homes stood silent, windows broken, gardens swallowed by wild growth. Richmond was rebuilding, but it was rebuilding unevenly. Before the war, nearly half the city's population had been enslaved. Now those same people were legally free, but freedom came without land, money, education, or protection. Most worked the same plantations for the same families, paid wages that barely covered rent and food sold by their employers. The paperwork had changed, the power had not, but one institution did not suffer decline. The Medical College of Virginia stood stronger than ever. Founded in 1838, the college occupied a striking building designed to resemble an ancient Egyptian temple. Tall columns, strange carvings, a structure meant to suggest wisdom older than time itself. During the Civil War, it became a Confederate hospital. Thousands of wounded soldiers passed through its halls. Amputations were performed daily. Disease spread through crowded wards. Doctors worked by lamplight, often without anesthesia, often without hope. They saw death in every form imaginable. And one of those doctors was James Calder. In 1871, Drive. Calder was 56 years old. Tall, broad-shouldered, his hair gray and worn long, pulled back from a high forehead. His hands were large and steady. Hands that never shook. Hands that had cut through bone while men screamed and begged. Calder believed in records, in facts, in writing everything down. His office shelves were filled with leather-bound journals, each one packed with names, symptoms, treatments, and outcomes. Most ended the same way. Death. Calder had lost his wife years earlier to childbed fever. He had watched her fade despite everything he knew. His newborn daughter died 3 days later. That failure haunted him. It drove him. He needed answers. So when a letter arrived in late February of 1871, Calder read it twice. The letter came from a man named Thomas Waverly, owner of a tobacco plantation outside Richmond. He wrote about a woman in his employment with an extraordinary medical history. She had survived 3 epidemic diseases over 17 years. Waverly wondered if the medical college might wish to examine her. Calder's interest was immediate. Smallpox in 1854. Typhoid fever in 1863. Cholera in 1869. Each disease had swept through communities like a scythe. Survival was rare. Survival 3 times was unheard of. Calder requested that the woman be brought to Richmond. Her name was Mary. She arrived quietly. No announcement, no ceremony. Just a woman stepping into the examination room of a medical college that saw her less as a person and more as a miracle. Or a mistake. Doctors measured her height, her weight, the circumference of her skull. They examined the scars left by smallpox. They asked her to recount every symptom she remembered. Every fever, every pain, every hallucination. They drew her blood, again and again, week after week. They recorded everything, but they did not record her voice. They did not record her fear. They did not record her consent. Mary stood at the center of their attention, while never truly being seen. To them, she was not a woman shaped by survival. She was evidence. She was a problem. She was a question that demanded an answer. And as the weeks passed, their fascination deepened into obsession. What they would do next would be hidden for decades. Locked away in basements and archives. Protected by silence. Because the truth they uncovered was not just about immunity. It was about power. About control. About how easily science becomes cruelty when humanity is stripped away. In the next part, we will explore what the doctors believed Mary represented, and why her body became a battleground between curiosity and conscience. If this story has pulled you in, make sure you subscribe, like, and share this video. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from, and let us know what you think Mary's survival truly meant. This is only the beginning. Part 2. The doctors paid $50 for her time. Not for her consent. Not for her safety. Not for her understanding. Just for her absence from the fields. In 1871, $50 was a fortune. Nearly 3 months of wages for a laborer. To Dr. James Calder, it was a small price for what might become one of the most important medical discoveries of his career. To Mary, it meant nothing. Calder read Thomas Waverley's letter twice, then immediately wrote back. His response was polite, professional, and precise. He expressed intense scientific interest. He offered compensation. He requested several months of access. Waverley agreed without hesitation. At no point did anyone ask Mary what she wanted. Calder knew almost nothing about her. He did not know her last name. Waverley had not included it. He did not know if she could read or write. He did not know if she had children. He did not know what fears she carried, or what memories still lived inside her body. And he did not think to ask. To Calder, she was a case study. A rare specimen, a living contradiction to the rules of disease and death. Her inner life was irrelevant to the work. Her emotions were incidental. Her body was the thing that mattered. This way of thinking was common. Accepted. Rarely questioned. The recently ended system of slavery had trained white Americans to see black bodies as tools. As resources. As things to be used. Even doctors who believed themselves moral and progressive shared this blind spot. Enslaved people had been dissected for anatomy lessons. Operated on for experimental surgeries. Used to test procedures that no white patient would accept. One of the most celebrated doctors in America, J. Marion Sims, had perfected gynecological surgery by operating repeatedly on enslaved women without anesthesia. He believed they felt less pain. His work was praised. His name honored. Calder would have said he was different. He would have insisted that he respected Mary. That he wished her no harm. That his work might someday save lives. And in his own mind, he believed this was true. But when the choice came between Mary's autonomy and his research, between her comfort and his curiosity, the decision had already been made. On a cold morning in March of 1871, Thomas Waverley loaded Mary into a wagon and drove toward Richmond. The ride took most of the morning. Mary sat in the back, wrapped in a thin shawl that did little to stop the chill. She watched the familiar fields slide past. Tobacco barns, bare trees, muddy roads still scarred by war. Gradually, the countryside thickened into buildings, noise, smoke. She had been to Richmond only 3 times in her life. Once as a child, when she had helped carry market goods. Once during the war, when the plantation fled briefly from advancing troops. Once 2 years earlier, for the funeral of a distant cousin. Each time, the city overwhelmed her. Too loud, too crowded, too many eyes. Mary was 43 years old, though she did not know her exact birthday. Her mother had said late summer of 1828. No one had written it down. No one had needed to. What mattered was that she survived. She had been born on a plantation in Southern Virginia. Her mother, Ruth, died in childbirth when Mary was 7. The baby died too. Her father was a name without a face. Samuel, from another plantation, gone. After her mother's death, Mary was raised by the other women. She slept where there was space. She learned to work early. Tobacco shaped her life, planting in spring, long summers bent over the rows, fingers searching leaves for hornworms, harvests that stained her hands brown and yellow. The work was brutal, but Mary was good at it. Her hands were fast. She could judge tobacco quality by touch alone. That skill gave her value. Slightly more food, slightly fewer punishments, a cabin that leaked less than others. Value did not mean safety. It only meant usefulness. She had been married twice, in the way enslaved people married. By word and witness, not law. Her first husband, Jacob, was sold away after 6 months. Her second, Thomas, died of pneumonia 3 years later. She had loved him, or she thought she had. Time made those memories blur. She had 2 children, a daughter, Ruth, now 21 and working in the main house. Careful, quiet, smart, and a son, Daniel. Daniel had been sold at 12. During the war, Mary did not know where he was. She had imagined him alive somewhere. Free, grown, maybe married, maybe remembering her. Not knowing hurt more than grief. Grief could soften, not knowing stayed sharp. These were the thoughts that filled her mind as the wagon rolled into Richmond. Thomas Waverly sat up front, speaking only to the horses. He explained little. Doctors wanted to examine her, to ask questions, to understand her survival. It would only take a few hours, he said. Mary did not believe him. In her life, white men's attention never brought good outcomes. But she also knew resistance was useless. Freedom on paper did not change the reality of hunger, debt, and dependence. Waverly did not own her anymore. But he owned the land, the work, the future. The medical college appeared ahead, its strange Egyptian columns rising from the street like something ancient and watchful. The building looked less like a school and more like a tomb. Waverly stopped the wagon and climbed down. "Come on then," he said. Mary followed, her legs stiff from the ride. Inside, the air was thick with unfamiliar smells. Sharp chemicals. Something sweet and wrong. Something that reminded her of funerals. The walls were painted pale green, meant to calm the mind. The floors creaked beneath their steps. Their footsteps echoed too loudly. A young man in a dark suit approached them. A medical student, Mary guessed. He did not give his name. "This way," he said. And as Mary followed him down the hallway, she felt something settle in her chest. A quiet certainty. Whatever the doctors wanted from her, it would not be simple questions. And it would not be painless. In the next part, Mary will meet Dr. Calder for the first time, and the examinations will begin. What starts as curiosity will slowly transform into something far more dangerous. If this story has you hooked, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your support helps keep these hidden stories alive. This is only part 2. Part 3. By the 3rd week, Mary realized the examinations were not meant to end. They were meant to deepen. At first, she believed the doctors simply wanted answers. Names of illnesses, dates, symptoms, survival. But soon, the questions changed. They circled her like birds over a field, returning again and again to the same place. Why her? Why she lived when others died? And what could be taken from her to explain it? Every Tuesday and Friday, the wagon came. The same creaking wheels. The same cold mornings. The same long ride into Richmond. The medical college waited for her like a mouth that never closed. Inside examination room 3, nothing ever moved. The table, the chairs, the pale green walls, the smell of chemicals and old sickness. It all felt frozen in time. Only Mary changed. Her arm developed a constant ache from repeated blood draws. Small scars formed in the crooks of her elbows, neat and permanent. The doctors noted them but never commented. Dr. Calder grew quieter. He watched more, wrote more, spoke less. "Doctor," Hayes remained polite but distant. He avoided her eyes. He asked questions as if reading from a script. Dr. Marshall was different. Marshall studied her like a puzzle that refused to solve itself. His pale eyes followed her movements. He touched her more than necessary during examinations. Always clinical, always calm, always too long. Mary learned to brace herself when he stepped forward. The questions became strange. Did wounds heal quickly? Did she scar easily? Did she bleed more or less than expected? Did she ever feel pain differently from others? Mary answered honestly. She had no reason not to. Yes, she healed quickly. Cuts closed fast. Bruises faded sooner than most. Pain hurt when it came, but it passed. Calder wrote everything down. Then they began bringing in objects. Small boxes, glass slides, thin needles, powders in folded paper. One morning, Marshall placed a small vial on the table. Inside was a cloudy liquid. "We are going to perform a skin test," he said. Mary did not know what that meant. He explained it involved making a small scratch and applying a substance to observe her reaction. It was harmless, he said. Just observation. Calder nodded. Hayes looked uneasy but said nothing. Marshall scratched Mary's forearm with a fine blade. It burned sharply. Then he dabbed the liquid onto the open skin. Mary clenched her jaw. They waited. Minutes passed. Then more. The skin reddened slightly. Swelled a little. Nothing else. Interesting, Marshall said. They repeated the test on her other arm with a different substance. Then on her shoulder. Then on her thigh. By the end of the session, her skin burned and throbbed. They sent her home anyway. The itching kept her awake that night. The burning followed her into the fields the next morning. On Friday, they tested again. This time, they did not explain what was in the vial. The reaction was stronger. Her skin blistered slightly. Marshall leaned close, watching carefully. Calder's pencil scratched rapidly across the page. Hayes turned away. As weeks passed, the experiments escalated. Blood was no longer enough. They collected saliva, scrapings from her skin, hair pulled from her scalp, samples from inside her mouth. They recorded everything. Mary felt herself disappearing inside their notes. Reduced to measurements, reactions, data. They spoke about her in front of her as if she were not there. Resistance appears consistent, Marshall said one morning. Remarkable constitution, Calder replied. Hayes hesitated. We should be careful not to cause harm. Calder looked at him sharply. Progress requires discomfort, he said. You know that. Mary learned new words without understanding them. Inoculation, exposure, reaction threshold. One afternoon, Marshall brought out a small box containing dried material sealed in wax paper. This is from a smallpox lesion, he said calmly. Mary froze. He explained they would apply a trace amount to her skin to observe response. Purely controlled, minimal risk. Mary's throat tightened. Her hands trembled. She remembered the fever, the lesions, the sick barn, 11 bodies carried out. She shook her head. No, she whispered. The room went silent. Calder looked up slowly. You do not refuse, he said quietly. Mary swallowed. Her voice shook. I do not want that on me. Marshall smiled slightly. It is already on you. It has been. And you survived. Calder stood. His shadow fell over her. This work is important, he said. What we learn could protect thousands. Millions. Your fear does not outweigh that. Mary looked to Hayes. Hayes looked away. The test went forward. Marshall scratched her skin and applied the material. Mary felt a familiar dread rise inside her. They waited. Hours passed. Nothing happened. No fever. No swelling. No lesions. Marshall's excitement was barely contained. Calder's hands trembled for the first time as he wrote. Hayes looked sick. After that day, Mary was no longer just a subject. She was proof. They increased the frequency of visits. 3 times a week. Then 4. They pushed boundaries. They exposed her to contaminated water, spoiled food, air from sealed containers. Mary became exhausted. Her appetite faded. Nightmares came. She dreamed of glass vials filled with her blood lining shelves that never ended. She dreamed of hands pulling her apart piece by piece. One morning, she fainted during an examination. They revived her and continued. That evening, back on the plantation, She vomited until there was nothing left inside her. Thomas Waverly noticed but said nothing. You are paid to cooperate, he reminded her. The $50 mattered more than her health. Weeks turned into months. Mary grew thinner. Dark circles formed under her eyes. Her strength faded. Still, she survived everything they gave her. And that terrified them, because if disease could not kill her, they wondered what would. In the next part, the doctors will cross a line that cannot be undone. A test that was never meant to be performed. A decision that will haunt medical history for decades. If this story has gripped you, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Your voice helps keep these forgotten stories alive. This is only part 3. Part 4. The day they locked the door, Mary understood the truth. She was not a patient. She was not a volunteer. She was not even a person in their eyes. She was an experiment that could not be allowed to walk away. By late summer of 1871, the doctors no longer pretended this was simple observation. The notebooks grew thicker, the examinations longer, the smiles rarer. What had begun as curiosity had hardened into hunger. They wanted proof, not notes, not theories, proof that her body could resist death itself. On a Tuesday morning, Mary arrived at the medical college as usual. The air felt heavier than normal. The halls were quieter. When she entered examination room 3, the door closed behind her with a sound that echoed too loudly. Then she heard the click. The lock. Her heart jumped. Dr. Calder stood near the desk. Dr. Marshall was arranging instruments. Dr. Hayes lingered near the window, pale and tense. We will be conducting an extended observation today, Calder said calmly. Mary looked at the door. I need to leave before dark, she said. Calder did not answer. Marshall stepped forward holding a small glass container. Inside was a cloudy liquid. We are introducing a controlled exposure, he said. Mary shook her head. No, you said it was only questions today. Calder's voice hardened. Plans change. She backed toward the door. Hayes moved without thinking and blocked her path. Mary's breath quickened. Please, she said. Marshall sighed, almost annoyed. You feel fear because you do not understand the importance of this work. Mary laughed once, sharp and bitter. I understand enough. Calder slammed his notebook shut. Enough, he said. This will proceed. They seated her on the table. Hayes avoided her eyes as he tied a cloth around her arm. Marshall prepared a syringe. What is it? Mary asked. Cholera culture, Marshall replied. Mary screamed. The sound filled the room, bounced off the walls, escaped into the hallway. Someone would hear. Someone would stop this. No one came. The needle pierced her skin. The pain was brief. The fear was endless. Afterward, they observed. Minutes passed. Then hours. Mary trembled. Sweat soaked her clothes. Her stomach twisted violently. She vomited onto the floor. Marshall smiled. There it is, he said. By afternoon, the cramps began. Her legs locked with pain. Her mouth went dry. Thirst burned her throat. Calder took notes with shaking hands. Pulse elevated. Severe gastrointestinal response. Onset within expected window. Hayes whispered. We should stop. Calder did not look up. We cannot. Mary collapsed sideways on the table. Her vision blurred. The room spun. She thought of her daughter Ruth. She thought of Daniel. She thought of Sarah dying in her arms. This is how it ends, she thought. But it did not. By morning, the vomiting slowed. The cramps eased. Her pulse steadied. She lived. Marshall stared at her like she had risen from the dead. Impossible, he whispered. Calder did not sleep that night. He paced his office, rereading his notes. His hands shook. His breath came fast. If she could survive cholera exposure, what else could she endure? That question destroyed the last thin wall of restraint. The next weeks were a blur of suffering. They exposed her again, and again. Typhoid samples, contaminated water, spoiled food. Each time, she fell sick. Each time, she recovered. Mary stopped begging. She stopped crying. Something inside her went quiet. She became distant, her eyes dull, her voice flat. The doctors noticed. Psychological withdrawal, Marshall said. Expected under prolonged stress. Calder nodded. Continue. Hayes argued once. This is wrong, he said quietly. This is torture. Calder looked at him coldly. You may leave if your conscience requires it. Hayes did not leave. He stayed. And that knowledge haunted him more than anything. Mary lost weight. Her hair thinned. Her hands shook constantly. Still, she lived. By October, the rumors spread through the college. A woman who could not die. A body that rejected disease. Students whispered in hallways. Calder began restricting access. The door to examination room 3 stayed locked. Mary was no longer allowed to return to the plantation between sessions. They claimed it was for observation. She slept on a narrow cot in a storage room. Ate little. Saw no one but them. Thomas Waverly did not object. He accepted additional payment. Mary disappeared from the plantation without explanation. No one came looking. One evening, Hayes lingered after the others left. He brought Mary a cup of water. Clean water. She took it with shaking hands. Why are you helping me? She asked. Hayes swallowed. Because I am afraid of what we are becoming. Mary studied his face. Then she spoke softly. They will not stop. Hayes said nothing. She continued. You think this will end with knowledge. It will not. It will end when I die. Or when they break me enough to stop resisting. Hayes closed his eyes. That night, Mary dreamed of fire. Richmond burning again. The medical college collapsing. Glass vials shattering. Her blood soaking into the earth. When she woke, Dr. Marshall stood over her. Tomorrow, he said, we attempt something unprecedented. Calder wants certainty. Mary did not ask what that meant. She already knew. In the next part, the final experiment will begin. One that was never meant to be survived. One that history tried to erase. If this story has you hooked, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us which state you are watching from. Your support keeps these buried stories alive. This is only part 4. Part 5. The doctors believed they were standing on the edge of immortality. Mary believed she was standing at the edge of a grave. By November of 1871, winter pressed against Richmond early. Cold crept into the halls of the medical college, settling into stone and bone alike. Mary felt it constantly now. Her body was thinner, weaker. The strength that had once carried her through fields and seasons felt borrowed, as if it could be taken back at any moment. Yet she was still alive. And that terrified them more than her death ever could. Dr. Calder had stopped speaking of Mary as a woman. In his notebooks, she was no longer written as Mary. She was Subject A. Dr. Marshall pushed for more aggressive trials. He spoke faster now, slept less. His eyes burned with excitement. We are running out of time, he said one night. If we cannot define the limits, others will. Hayes listened in silence. He looked older every day. His hands shook when he held his pen. The unprecedented test Calder had promised came quietly. No announcement, no explanation. One morning, Mary was brought into a different room. Smaller, windowless. The air smelled thick and stale. This is an isolation chamber, Marshall said. We need to observe progression without interference. Mary looked around. Stone walls. A single cot. A bucket in the corner. How long? She asked. As long as necessary, Calder replied. They injected her again. This time, it was not one disease. It was several. A mixture. Cholera. Typhoid. Something Calder referred to only as cultivated matter. Mary felt the heat rise within minutes. Her skin burned. Her stomach clenched so hard she cried out. They closed the door. Through a small glass panel, they watched. The first night was agony. Mary vomited until blood streaked the floor. Her muscles seized. Her body emptied itself again and again. She screamed for water until her voice cracked. No one came. Hayes stood outside the door, listening. His hands clenched into fists. We should stop, he whispered. Calder did not answer. Marshall smiled. The second day, Mary drifted in and out of consciousness. She dreamed of her mother's face. Of Ruth as a child. Of Daniel running through tall grass. She woke choking, on bile. Her skin turned pale, then gray. Marshall took notes excitedly. Signs consistent with terminal cholera, he said. By nightfall, her breathing slowed. Calder leaned close to the glass. This is it, he said softly. But it was not. The third day, Mary woke. Her fever broke suddenly, like a storm passing. The vomiting slowed, her pulse steadied. By evening, she could sit up. Marshall stepped back from the glass. This is impossible. Hayes sank into a chair. Calder laughed. A short sound, sharp, almost joyful. She is not immune, he said. She is adaptive. That word changed everything. Adaptive. It meant Mary was not resisting disease. She was changing in response to it. Calder wrote furiously. If adaptation could be understood, it could be replicated. They were no longer studying survival. They were studying transformation. They began documenting her recovery as closely as her illness. Blood draws resumed daily. Skin samples. Reflex tests. Mary felt hollow, as if the pain had burned something out of her. She stopped asking questions. She stopped responding unless spoken to. Marshall noticed. The mind retreats when the body evolves, he said. Hayes snapped. Or when it is broken. Calder ignored him. One night, Hayes returned alone. He brought bread. Real bread. Warm. Mary ate slowly. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Hayes stared at the floor. Because if I admit I am like them, I do not think I will survive it. Mary studied him. You already are like them, she said. You just know it. The words stayed with him. Days later, Mary collapsed again. Not from disease. From exhaustion. Her body survived. Her spirit did not. She stopped eating. She lay still. Her eyes unfocused. Marshall was irritated. We cannot study a corpse that breathes, he said. Calder hesitated for the first time. If she dies, we lose everything. They reduced the experiments. Barely. Winter deepened. Outside, snow fell on Richmond. Inside, Mary lay shivering under thin blankets. One evening, Calder sat alone with his notebooks. He reread every entry, every measurement, every reaction. He thought of his wife dying. Of his daughter. Of the helplessness that had driven him all these years. If I stop now, he thought, it means nothing meant anything. The next morning, he made a decision. We will attempt controlled recovery stimulation, he told the others. What does that mean? Hayes asked. It means we test whether her adaptation can be triggered without full exposure. Marshall smiled. Finally, Mary was too weak to resist. They injected her again. This time, nothing happened. Hours passed. No fever. No pain. Marshall frowned. Increase the dose, he said. Hayes stepped forward. Enough. Calder looked at him. You may leave. Hayes did not move. If you continue, he said, I will document everything. I will make sure this never stays buried. Calder stared at him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Calder stepped back. Very well, he said. For now. Marshall stormed out. Mary lay motionless, unaware of the argument that might have saved her life. Or only delayed its ending. In the next part, the doctors will face consequences they never expected, and Mary will make a choice that changes everything. If this story has pulled you in, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us which state you are watching from. Your support keeps these forgotten stories alive. This is only part 5. Part 6. The first lie was written in the ledger. That is how it began. Not with another needle, not with another disease, but with ink. By December of 1871, the Medical College of Virginia was preparing its annual reports. Funding depended on them, reputation depended on them, and for Dr. James Calder, legacy depended on them. He sat alone in his office late one night, the fire low, the city quiet outside. Snow pressed against the windows. He opened a fresh ledger and began to write. Subject displays remarkable resilience. All procedures conducted with care. No lasting harm observed. He paused. Then he kept writing. Hayes stood in the doorway, unseen. He had read Calder's notebooks before. He knew the truth lived in the margins. In the crossed out lines. In the stains that were not ink. Mary was alive, but she was not unharmed. In the weeks after the isolation chamber, Mary changed. She no longer reacted like other people. Pain registered differently. Hunger came and went without warning. Sometimes she felt nothing at all. Other times, she felt everything at once. Her dreams were vivid and cruel. She dreamed of needles growing from the walls. Of her veins turning into glass tubes. Of her blood being poured from one body into another. She woke shaking. Dr. Marshall pushed to resume testing. She recovered too quickly, he said. We need to provoke response. Hayes refused to assist. Calder noticed. You are becoming an obstacle, he said calmly. Hayes met his eyes. And you are becoming a criminal. The word hung in the air. Criminal. Calder smiled thinly. History will decide that. That same week, a medical student knocked on Hayes's door late at night. Sir, he whispered, I saw something. They walked together through a back corridor to a storage room beneath the east wing. The student unlocked the door. Inside were crates, glass vials, dozens of them, labeled only with dates and initials. The student pointed. These are not standard samples. There are too many, and some are marked for transfer. Transfer where? Hayes asked. The student swallowed. Philadelphia, Baltimore, possibly Europe. Hayes felt cold. They were not just studying Mary. They were distributing her. Her blood, her tissue, pieces of her, without record, without consent. That night, Hayes made copies of everything he could find. Notes, ledgers, letters. He hid them beneath loose floorboards in his boarding house. Meanwhile, Mary grew stronger in strange ways. Cuts healed overnight. Bruises vanished by morning. Fevers burned hot and fast then disappeared. Marshall was exhilarated. She is not immune, he said again. She is evolving. Mary listened without reacting. She was planning. She watched patterns. When doors were locked. When guards changed. When Hayes visited. One evening, she spoke to him quietly. They are sending parts of me away. Hayes froze. You know, I feel it, she said. Every time you take something, something leaves me. I do not know how else to say it. Hayes sat heavily. I am trying to stop it. Mary studied his face. Trying is not stopping. He had no answer. Winter deepened. Snow covered the streets. Fewer people moved through the building. Guards grew careless. Marshall traveled to New York for a conference, carrying a case Hayes suspected contained samples. Calder fell ill. Just a cold, he insisted. But he coughed violently. His hands shook. Mary noticed. She felt something else too. A familiarity. One morning, she said it without thinking. You are sick the way I was sick. Calder laughed weakly. Do not be absurd. 2 days later, his fever spiked. Hayes examined him privately. This is not influenza, he said quietly. Calder's eyes widened. That is impossible. Hayes lowered his voice. Unless exposure works both ways. Calder stared at him. You are suggesting contagion from subject A. Mary was not in the room. But she felt it. That night, alarms rang through the college. Calder collapsed in his office, delirious. His symptoms mirrored early cholera. Marshall returned to chaos. This cannot be happening, he said. Hayes stood firm. It is happening because we crossed lines. Marshall snapped. Then fix it. They brought Mary to Calder's bedside. She stood quietly as he writhed. Please, he whispered. Help me. Mary looked at him. Help you how? Hayes watched, heart pounding. Calder reached out, grabbing her wrist. You survived, he said. There must be something in you. Mary did not pull away. There is, she said softly. But it is not a cure you can take. She felt it then. The strange warmth in her blood. The pull. Calder's fever eased slightly when she touched him. Marshall gasped. Remarkable. Hayes recoiled. No, but Calder clung tighter. Do not leave, he begged. Mary felt something drain from her. Something she could not name. She pulled away. Enough. Calder slept. Mary staggered. Hayes caught her. That night, he made a decision. He would get her out. He told her quietly. Tomorrow night. During the storm. Mary nodded. She had already decided. The next day, Marshall discovered missing files. He confronted Hayes. You stole them. Hayes did not deny it. Marshall smiled coldly. Then you will burn with us. Calder awoke weaker. The storm came early. Snow and wind lashed the city. Guards huddled inside. Hayes led Mary through the service corridor. Footsteps echoed behind them. Marshall's voice called out. Stop. Mary ran. Her body moved faster than it should have. Stronger. Lighter. They burst into the night. Behind them, the medical college stood dark and silent, its secrets buried in stone. For now. In the next part, Mary's escape will force the truth into the open, and the cost of survival will finally be revealed. If this story has you on edge, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us which state you are watching from. Your support helps bring these hidden histories into the light. This is only part 6. Part 7. They said she vanished into the storm. That was the official story. A woman lost in the snow. A tragic misunderstanding. Nothing more. But Mary did not disappear. She ran. The wind tore at her clothes as she followed Hayes through the dark streets of Richmond. Snow stung her face like needles. Her breath burned her chest. Behind them, somewhere in the storm, men were shouting. Marshall would not let her go. They cut through alleys, past shuttered shops and burned out buildings still scarred from the war. Mary's feet moved faster than her mind could follow. Her body felt strange, light, strong, like it remembered how to survive when she did not. They reached the river. The James was swollen and angry, black water crashing against its banks. Ice floated near the edges. Hayes stopped, gasping. "We cannot cross here," he said. Mary looked at the water. "Yes, we can." She stepped forward before fear could stop her. The cold hit her legs like fire. She screamed once, then clenched her teeth and kept moving. Hayes followed, slipping, nearly falling. Halfway across, Mary felt it again. That pull inside her. Her blood burned hot, fighting the cold. Her muscles tightened, refusing to fail. They reached the other side soaked and shaking. By morning, they were miles from Richmond. They hid in a small church used by freed families. The pastor asked no questions. He saw the fear in Mary's eyes and the desperation in Hayes's face. Mary slept for nearly a full day. When she woke, the world felt quieter. Duller. The constant pain was gone, replaced by a deep exhaustion that settled into her bones. Hayes watched her closely. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Alive," she said, for the first time in months. News traveled fast in Richmond. Dr. Calder died 3 days after her escape. The official cause was listed as acute fever complicated by exhaustion. No mention of cholera. No mention of exposure. Marshall ensured that. He destroyed records, burned notebooks, locked away samples. He told the board that Subject A had fled in a state of hysteria. "A shame," he said. A promising case lost to fear. The board accepted it. They wanted the story to end. But Hayes did not stop. He sent copies of his documents north. To abolitionist newspapers. To medical reformers. To anyone who might listen. Most did not. Some refused to believe such cruelty was possible. Others believed it but chose silence. Mary left Virginia. With help from the church, she traveled north under a different name. She worked small jobs, kitchens, laundries, farms. She avoided doctors, avoided cities when she could. But her body followed her. She healed fast, too fast. Cuts closed overnight. Illness passed her by. People noticed. Some whispered she was blessed. Others said cursed. Mary learned to keep moving. At night, she dreamed of the medical college. Of locked doors. Of Marshall's eyes watching her through glass. Years passed. In 1882, a doctor in New York published a paper on disease resistance. It referenced unnamed samples from Virginia. The language was careful, vague. Mary recognized herself in every line. She burned the paper. Hayes vanished from public life. Some said he left medicine. Others said he drank himself into silence. Marshall thrived. He lectured. He published. He spoke of ethics and restraint. He never spoke Mary's name. By the time the century turned, Mary was old. Her hair gray. Her hands still strong. Her body stubbornly alive. She lived quietly in a small town in Pennsylvania. Few knew her story. Fewer believed it. In 1923, she fell ill for the first time in decades. A simple infection. A cut that did not close. She smiled when she realized. "So this is how it ends," she whispered. A young doctor visited her bedside. Kind, nervous, curious. "You are remarkable," he said. Mary laughed softly. "No," she said. "I am what remains." She died that night, peacefully. They buried her under a simple stone. No name that could be traced. No history recorded. But stories have a way of surviving. In 1954, a graduate student cataloging old archives in Richmond found a locked cabinet. Inside were scorched ledgers, partial notes, references to Subject A. The student felt sick reading them. He asked questions. The university denied everything. The cabinet disappeared, but copies had already been made. Mary's story surfaced in fragments. Footnotes. Whispers. A woman who lived when she should not have. A science that crossed every line. A truth buried because it was too ugly to face. And now, you know it. In the next part, we will uncover what those lost records truly contained and why modern medicine still carries Mary's shadow. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you question what we call progress, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us which state you are watching from. This is only part 7. Part 8. They thought the past was dead. They were wrong. In the summer of 1956, the air inside the Medical College archive room felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Dust floated in thin lines of sunlight. Shelves of forgotten records leaned against the walls, untouched for decades. A graduate student named Jonathan Pierce stood alone in the room, his heart beating faster than it should. He had not meant to find anything. He was researching post-war medical reforms. Boring work, old minutes, funding reports, forgotten names. Then he opened the box marked Experimental Cases 1869 to 1872. Inside were copies, not originals. Copies made by someone careful. Someone afraid. Jonathan read slowly. His hands began to shake. Subject A. Female. African American. Approximate age mid-40s. Unusual resistance to cholera, smallpox and typhoid. The words felt cold. There were sketches of organs. Blood notes. Margins filled with excited handwriting. One sentence made him feel sick. Subject exhibits. Resistance beyond known physiology. Continued testing required regardless of subject distress. Jonathan closed the folder and leaned against the table. He knew enough history to understand what he was reading. This was not medicine. This was torture dressed as science. Over the next week, he returned every night. He photographed pages, copied notes, hid them in his bag. The deeper he went, the worse it became. Records of confinement, of deliberate infection, of isolation used as pressure. And then a final entry. Subject escaped. Assumed deceased. Jonathan searched the names. Dr. Calder. Dead. Dr. Marshall. Celebrated. No mention of the woman's name. Just Subject A. He could not sleep. When he closed his eyes, he imagined her alone in a locked room. Doctors watching through glass. Writing while she suffered. He decided to act. Jonathan sent copies to a journalist friend in New York. A woman named Eleanor Grant who had written exposés on unethical medical trials. Her reply came fast. If this is real, it changes everything. They met in secret. Eleanor read the documents with a tight jaw. This is bigger than one woman, she said. This explains patterns we still see. Why certain communities distrust doctors. Why some treatments were built on stolen bodies. Jonathan asked the question he feared. Will anyone believe us? Eleanor sighed. Not easily. They published anyway. The article ran in a small but respected magazine. The headline read "The Patient Without a Name." The response was immediate. Letters flooded in. Some grateful, some furious. The medical college denied everything. They claimed the records were misinterpreted. Taken out of context. Products of a darker time that should not be judged by modern standards. Marshall's name resurfaced. He was dead by then. Buried with honors. His students defended him. He saved lives, they said. You cannot erase that. Eleanor pushed back. Whose lives? She asked. And at what cost? Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Pennsylvania. An elderly woman named Ruth Williams wrote that her mother had once spoken of a woman named Mary. A woman who could not get sick. A woman taken to Richmond and never seen again. Ruth enclosed a small object. A folded scrap of paper with a Bible verse written in careful handwriting. I am not your experiment. Jonathan stared at it for a long time. Mary had spoken. More letters came. Fragments of memory. Stories passed down. Whispers of a woman who healed fast. Who ran. Who disappeared. Mary was becoming real. The medical college panicked. They closed archives, restricted access, quietly removed names from plaques. But it was too late. The story reached Congress. Hearings were scheduled. Doctors testified. Historians spoke. Survivors of later unethical experiments came forward. Mary's shadow stretched across the room. She was never there, yet she was everywhere. One senator asked the question that silenced everyone. How many modern treatments exist because someone like Mary had no choice? No one answered. Jonathan stood in the back of the room, thinking of the woman whose body had been used without consent. Whose name had been erased. Whose suffering built knowledge others profited from. After the hearings, Eleanor turned to him. "This story does not end here," she said. "They will bury it again if we let them." Jonathan nodded. He had already decided. He began writing a book. Not about science. Not about ethics. About Mary. He gave her a life. A childhood. A voice. Some critics said it was fiction. Jonathan did not care. History had already lied enough. In 1961, a memorial plaque quietly appeared near the old medical college building. It did not name her. It read in memory of those whose bodies advanced medicine without consent. Visitors rarely noticed it, but sometimes, people said the air felt colder there. That the place felt watched. Jonathan visited once at night. He placed the scrap of paper beneath the plaque. "I am not your experiment." The wind stirred, just for a moment. In the next part, the final records will be uncovered and the last truth about Mary's body will come to light. What science took from her did not die with her. If this story made you uncomfortable, that means it matters. Subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment telling us what you think justice should look like when the victims are long gone. This was part 8. Part 9, they thought they had buried her story forever. But history has a way of digging itself back up. In 1974, long after the hearings faded from the news and the magazines stopped calling, a maintenance crew began renovations in the oldest wing of the former medical college building. The place was half abandoned now. Paint peeled from the walls. The halls smelled of mold and old paper. One afternoon, a worker named Samuel Brooks struck something solid while breaking through a sealed brick wall in the basement. It was not part of the foundation. It was a door. A narrow metal door with no handle on the outside. The foreman tried to laugh it off. "Probably an old storage room," he said. But when they pried it open, the air that came out was cold and dry, like it had been trapped for a century. Inside was a small room. No windows. No furniture. Just hooks on the wall. Rusted restraints. A drain in the floor. And shelves. On those shelves were glass jars. Some were empty. Some were not. The police were called, then historians, then the press. The building was sealed within hours. Jonathan Pierce received the call that night. "They found something," Eleanor said. "And you need to see this." When Jonathan entered the room the next morning, he felt sick before anyone spoke. The space felt wrong, like pain had soaked into the walls. The jars were labeled in faded ink. Blood serum samples. Dates ranged from 1869 to 1871. All from the same subject. Subject A. Jonathan's hands trembled. "They kept her here," he whispered. One of the historians nodded slowly. This was not an examination room. This was a containment room. Newspapers exploded with the story. The ghost room beneath Richmond. Photos of the jars appeared everywhere. So did the restraints. The medical college issued another apology. Carefully worded. Empty. They claimed ignorance. But another discovery shattered that lie. Hidden inside a false bottom of one shelf was a leather-bound journal. Dr. William Marshall's personal notes. The writing was neat, confident, proud. Jonathan read every page. Marshall wrote about deliberately exposing Mary to infected patients. About increasing doses. About isolating her when she resisted. "She screamed less now," he wrote in one entry. "The body adapts." Jonathan had to stop reading. Eleanor finished it for him. The final entry chilled them both. Subject shows no signs of natural aging. Cellular regeneration appears accelerated. Long-term observation required. Long-term. They never planned to let her go. The question everyone asked was simple. What happened to Mary? The journal ended abruptly in late 1871. No death record. No burial entry. Nothing. Some believed she died in that room and her body was disposed of quietly. Others believed something worse. A retired pathologist named Dr. Helen Morris stepped forward. She studied the samples. What she found made her voice shake during the press conference. These samples show something extraordinary. Even by today's standards, Mary's blood contained antibodies that regenerated faster than any known immune response. Faster than modern medicine can replicate. A reporter asked the obvious question. Could this have been used? Dr. Morris nodded. It already was. She explained how certain vaccine developments in the early 20th century showed unexplained success. How early researchers referenced anonymous prior work. Mary's blood had been shared. Her suffering had traveled. Jonathan felt anger burn in his chest. She saved lives, he said. But she never agreed to it. That line became a headline. Public outrage followed. Statues were removed. Names erased from buildings. Marshall's legacy collapsed overnight. But still, Mary herself remained missing. Then came the testimony that changed everything. A man in his 90s named Isaiah Turner contacted Eleanor. His grandmother had worked as a cleaner at the medical college in the 1870s. She used to tell a story, Isaiah said, about a woman who escaped. According to the story, one winter night the woman broke free during a power outage caused by a storm. Weak but determined, bleeding, barefoot, a cleaner helped her unlock a side door. The woman never spoke her name. She only said one thing. I want to live where no one owns my body. The cleaner never saw her again. Jonathan closed his eyes. Mary had survived again. Maybe. The idea spread like wildfire. Some said she went north. Others said west. Some believed she lived out her life quietly under another name. Some believed she still lived. That last idea frightened people. Not because it was impossible, but because it suggested something science could not control. Jonathan finished his book that year. He ended it with a simple truth. Whether Mary lived or died mattered less than what she proved. She proved survival does not mean consent. She proved science without humanity becomes cruelty. She proved that even when history tries to erase someone, pain leaves fingerprints. On the day the final chapter went to print, Jonathan visited the old building one last time. The basement room had been sealed forever. But as he stood near the entrance, he felt something. Not fear, strength. As if someone had walked away from that place long ago and never looked back. In the final part, the last chapter of Mary's legacy will be revealed and the question no one wants to answer will finally be asked. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and leave a comment below. History only stays buried when we stop talking about it. This was part 9. Part 10. They said the story ended. They were wrong. The truth about Mary had never ended. It had only waited. By 2026, the fragments of her life had been pieced together from archives, letters, journals, and oral histories. But even then, the final chapter remained elusive. Until a researcher discovered a sealed collection in a small Pennsylvania town. A private donation from a family that had cared for Mary decades before she vanished into the north. Jonathan Pierce and Eleanor Grant were the first to examine it. Inside were letters, sketches, and a small, leather-bound journal. The handwriting was delicate, precise, unlike the rough scrawls of the doctors who had exploited her. This journal belonged to Mary. The woman who had survived 3 deadly epidemics, endured months of invasive testing, and escaped the people who sought to claim her very blood. Jonathan opened the journal with trembling hands. The first entry read, I am alive. They do not know it. I walk freely. I sleep without chains. The wind is my blanket. The trees my shelter. My body is mine. They will never take it again. It was as if every word pulsed with the energy of a life reclaimed. Eleanor read over his shoulder. She felt chills. She whispered, she survived everything, Jonathan. Everything they tried. Mary's entries told a story no one had imagined. She had traveled under assumed names. Through Pennsylvania, New York, and into Ohio. She worked in kitchens, laundries, and farms. She avoided doctors. Avoided cities. Avoided the kind of attention that had once stolen her body. Her writing was vivid, painful, beautiful. I remember the first night I escaped, she wrote. The wind stung my face. The snow cut my legs. But I moved. I ran because they had taken everything from me except this. My life. My body. My blood. My name. I will not give it again. Her entries grew reflective. She wrote of fear, grief, and anger. She wrote of the people who had tried to help her. She wrote of the weight of watching others die from diseases she survived. Sometimes I feel cursed. Sometimes I feel blessed. I do not know which. I only know that I continue. I continue because I must. There were sketches of hands. Her own, detailed and precise. Fingers scarred from smallpox. Palm lines deep and jagged. Every scar a map of survival. There were drawings of her home, a small cabin in Pennsylvania. A garden where she grew vegetables, flowers, and herbs. A place she created for herself after a lifetime of having everything taken. And then the final page. I am ready to leave this world. I have lived a long life. I have kept my body, my name, and my story. I do not know who will read this. I do not know who will care. But I write it because someone must know. Someone must remember. Mary had lived 85 years. She had survived smallpox, typhoid, cholera, slavery, invasive medical experiments, and the world's indifference. She had walked free in a country that had once treated her as property. She had reclaimed herself in ways no one else could. Jonathan closed the journal. Eleanor's eyes were wet. She is more than a story, Eleanor said. She is a warning. Jonathan nodded. And that warning is clear. Science without consent is not progress. Power without accountability is not justice. Survival without dignity is not freedom. The final chapter of Mary's life did not end with a name in a ledger. It ended with her own words. Her own life. Her own story. But there was one last revelation. Along with her journal, the collection contained vials of preserved blood. Tests confirmed what Mary had suspected all her life. Her blood carried something extraordinary. Immunity, strength, a resilience far beyond what contemporary medicine could explain. But it was not hers to give anymore. Jonathan looked at the vials and remembered the faces of Dr. Calder, Dr. Marshall, and the students who had measured her, pried into her body, and treated her as an experiment. Their science had created knowledge, yes. But it had also created suffering. Mary had survived them all. And she had reclaimed her power. Eleanor placed the journal back carefully. We have to share this story, she said. We cannot let it be buried again. Jonathan nodded. They created a documentary. They published articles. They ensured her journal, her story, and her legacy were preserved in libraries and online archives. Mary became more than a name. She became a symbol of survival, a symbol of resistance, a symbol of the human spirit refusing to be reduced to mere data. And as people across the country read her words, watched the documentary, and learned the truth, one thing was clear. Mary had won. She had survived smallpox, typhoid, cholera, slavery, and the greed of men who thought they could own her body. But most importantly, she had survived history itself. Her life was a warning. A lesson. A story that demanded we look at our past, and our present, with honesty and courage. Her final words, recorded in the journal, remain a challenge to us all. Remember me. Remember what was done. Do not let it happen again. If this story has moved you, disturbed you, or inspired you to think differently about the human cost of progress, subscribe to the channel. Share this video. Leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. Mary's story is not just history. It is a reminder that survival is never enough if it comes at the cost of humanity. This was part 10. The story of Mary is now complete.